everybody. Welcome to another episode of Grow Yourself from the Inside Out. And I got to tell you, I'm really geeked about today's episode because this episode and my guest, what we're going to talk about, really just gets to the heart of what Grow Yourself is all about. Growing from the inside out, personally, professionally, and even spiritually. And so, in just a moment, you're going to hear from a man, a professional, an executive who has found enormous success on all three fronts, personally, professionally, and spiritually. And in my way of thinking, he would be sort of the ultimate mentor. In fact, he did work very, very closely with, and one could say mentored, but I will ask him about this with a very familiar person in the late Steve Jobs. So my guest is Nick Donofrio. Nick joined IBM just as it ascended to the market leadership with its iconic System 360 mainframe. That's a mouthful. This pioneer, and that is Nick, would eventually ascend to the position of Executive Vice President of Innovation and Technology. Remember, for the giant IBM organization. Nick further went on to lead IBM's technical community in the 21st century, and he was named one of Business Week's 25 top innovation champions. So Nick also, in fact, recently published a book along with Michael DeMarco called "If Nothing Changes, Nothing Changes." In this book, Nick shares his life story along with lessons that shaped his career. Even more, Nick offers a shining message of hope from a life well lived that every day brings new opportunities to change our path for the better. With both heart and candor, Nick explains how he led IBM's global team to embrace a market-centric focus, redefining innovation and sparking worldwide collaboration for the Big Blue. His book is a powerful testimony to our ability as human beings to drive transformation. Nick, welcome to Grow Yourself. And listen, thank you so much for taking the time to be with me here today and us.
Kevin, thank you for having me. It's truly a pleasure to be with you. I'm looking forward to it. And I thank you for that very generous and kind introduction.
Well, listen, it's very interesting. I have to be honest with you. Even as I was reading it, I was just getting, some chills going up my back, because it really does get to the heart of what, this is not about me, but it does get to the heart of what I do, what I love to talk about, and that is personal and professional growth, helping people grow from the inside out. And you just, in your book, you just captured all of that, from a business standpoint, personal standpoint, professional standpoint. And so, listen, I just want to jump right in on it. My audience knows I typically have a couple of questions that kind of kick us off, but I'm just going to go in the direction that the spirit moves us and kind of go from there. In that said, but let me tell you, so this book and this interview, it's really about a lot more things than business transformation, technology. It's about work life. It's about the American dream. It's about innovation, about learning, growing, mentoring, and influence, which I don't want to forget to ask you about.
Right.
About courage and humility. So, let me just kind of start off and just ask you, first of all, where are you coming from right now as we speak? Where are you at this moment?
So we live in Ridgefield, Connecticut. This is our house. My wife actually is a builder. She built this house. I'm actually in our little library. So, it's close to where I was born and raised. We picked this place purposefully when we moved down from Burlington, Vermont. Purposely because we knew we had elderly parents who still lived in Beacon, New York, and that most of our travel time was going to be to Beacon. And it worked out to be correct, Kevin. My mother, God rest her soul, lived to 98. My mother-in-law lived to 102, and she just passed away a few months ago. So my wife has very good instincts. She's very intuitive.
Man.
She knew what she wanted, And while we looked from here to Greenwich, in Connecticut, right along the Western Front, this is where we settled. We've been here now since '87. This is home. This is where we'll be for the rest of our lives.
Man, that's a beautiful thing. So in talking about your book, again, if nothing changes, nothing changes. Really, let me just ask you what really launched that in your mind to write it? Why did you write it?
It's a really good question, Kevin. As my parents became older and my wife's parents became, my wife is my high school sweetheart, by the way. She would hate for me to tell you that.
And been married how long?
So we will this year, we'll be married 55 years.
That's
so
impressive.
we've been boyfriend and girlfriend for 60 years, because senior year in high school. Now she doesn't want you to know that, because she doesn't want you to know how old she is either. So that's a different problem.
Got it.
Please do not rat me out on that, Kevin.
I will not. We will not even tell her that this podcast exists. I get it.
Thank you. So, I was thinking as my parents got older, I am the grandson of poor Italian immigrants. So my mom and dad are first generation. And I kept saying to myself and my wife, I said, we should document all of this history. We're Italian, I wanted to hear from my mother. I wanted to hear from my father. My father unfortunately passed away first. Where were you? Where did they all come from? My grandparents basically only spoke Italian. So they understood English, but we had to learn to understand and appreciate Italian. So I wanted that preserved in some way, shape, or manner. So I proceeded to write my mother's book along with Mike DeMarco.
Oh, wow.
And that, unfortunately, my father had passed away, but my mother told a great story. I learned a lot. We got a tremendous amount of information. So we self-documented my mother. And then I said to my wife, you know what, Anita, we should do the same thing with your mother. Again, her parents were Italian immigrants. Her father's parents were Russian Jewish immigrants.
Interesting.
So I said, let's get this all documented. Now, the blessing with my mother-in-law's book is my father-in-law was a lieutenant commander in the Navy in World War II. So they actually preserved his history. They did an oral documentation of him before he passed away. We embedded that in the book as well. So, I felt pretty good having documented the anchors, to our family life.
Wow.
For the kids, for the grandchildren, for the children, the grandchildren I don't even know and won't know. So I said to myself, it's probably time, Nick, for you to step up to the plate and for you to do the same thing for yourself. I agonized, candidly, Kevin. It took me 2 years to make my mind up to do this. And then I did the first part of this. I did the self-documentation part of it, the front end of the book, who I am, how I got here, what my parents taught me, what I learned, why I learned it, how I learned it. And then it just slid into, my IBM career. And then once I got there, I turned around and said to myself, there is something else here besides just you saying things about yourself and the lessons you learned. Let's listen to other people tell their view on your point of view. Let's listen to them either confirm or refute your point of view. And as you know, the book has 37 other people in it, which then made the book a very long project. So it took Mike and I almost 6 years to complete the book.
Yeah, it's like getting your PhD, quite frankly. You really have to do, no kidding. So, okay, no, that's fascinating. So, but let me ask now a slightly off the beaten path question here as I'm thinking about it, because I started doing some of this with my father, who, God rest his soul, died last year. But, just maybe just a tip or two that you would offer to other people who maybe have either thought about it or that we would encourage to do that. What would you say? How would they maybe start thinking about documenting either their life or their parents or whatever? What tips might you offer them?
Yes, a great question. Honestly, if you don't have it within yourself to write, and I'm more of a technical person. I'm an engineer. I'm a problem solver. My wife's the liberal arts person in the family, so we're kind of polar opposites. I realized I needed a partner. So, finding someone like Mike DeMarco is not that difficult, is what I would say to you.
I got you.
And it's not terribly expensive, in the scheme of things, to actually, self-document yourself, your family, and to have something like that documented for heritage. It's powerful. I mean, I even gave books, my mother's book, which we never really got an ISBN for, or my mother-in-law's, but I gave it to the Beacon Public Library. I said, somebody might actually want to research this. So let me give you these two books to kind of put in, your reference material. So I think what you want to do is to get comfortable with yourself. Number one, and say, you know what, it's worthwhile. It's worthwhile just for the family. Forget about the world.
Right.
I'm going to do this for myself and for the family. And then go find somebody to help you do it. Colleges and universities have lots of people who will help you do this.
That's
remember,
fascinating.
A lot of interesting students who would love to get a project like this and use it, in some way, shape, or manner as they advance their own career. So I would encourage your listeners to, if you're so motivated, go find a partner, go get somebody to do it with. And then all of a sudden, as I did my mother's, I'm finding relatives I didn't even know. They all want copies of the book.
Wow.
They said, well, I started down this path. I failed. Thank you, Nick, for filling in all the blanks about where we came from, how we got here, and what our forefathers and foremothers did, before they even showed up on these foreign soils. So I find a partner. Colleges and universities could help you. Even high schools could help you. There are some very gifted and talented students who would love this for a project.
Imagine. Yes. Yeah. Wow. That's fantastic. I will throw one more thing out there that goes right along with what you're doing, that even another place to start is, and I started doing this with my father, is one day he was over at the house, and my father was 26 years Army Green Beret, 3 tours in Vietnam, all this. I sat down and I said, hey, Dad, can I just put a camera on you and start asking you questions? And the stuff I learned was incredible. So, that's even one place to start, but I agree with you, reaching out to the colleges and universities and just get, wow, that's really fascinating.
I have to pick up on that one point,
Please.
Kevin, if I might. So we struggled to figure out exactly where one part of my Italian family came from. So I'll never forget this. And I kept asking my mother, who knew everything, and she just couldn't remember. So I remember this one day, I'm with my mother, she's in her chair watching TV, the Yankees. She was a huge New York Yankee fan. Go Yankees. And I asked her one more time, Mom, where was Grandma from? Do you remember the part of Italy? And honestly, Kevin, like that, she came up with the name. And that.
No kidding. And may I ask where? I want to hear.
Yeah. So Aparia. It's just outside of Naples.
Oh, very nice.
And we couldn't figure it out. We just couldn't. She had the keys in her head. She had it all, and she wasn't a dementia or anything like that. It's just like, she would rattle
not
off
something you think about every day.
She would rattle off all these other Italian cities, and then I just said, Ma, just one more time, where do you think Grandma was from? What do you remember her telling you? And then I said, this is why you do this. This is why you do this, because this is how you preserve your history.
Man, that is so fascinating.
Yeah. So when she passed, that knowledge passed along with her.
That's right,
Kevin. And that's the way you have to think about it.
Yeah. Before we go on, and I do want to ask, this is purely curiosity and nothing more. So what was your grandfather's name? I just want to hear it. You said he was immigrated here, correct?
Yeah.
What was his name? I just want to hear it.
Both of them, Giovanni,
love it.
So Donofrio, by the way, our name was spelled differently. Our name was spelled D''O''Nofrio. Donofrio. That's kind of the way it was. Donofrio. Our name was changed when my father went into World War II. The government changed it for him.
Stop
They
it.
they spelled it very simply. They spelled it Donofrio. That's the way it's been ever since, to be candid with you,
Wow.
Kevin. Yeah. So he got his discharge papers that way, and our life has always been Donofrio.
And it's
Yeah.
pronounced Donofrio. Is that correct?
Well,
or
Donofrio,
but technically it's Donofrio. Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
And your father's name?
Nicholas.
Nicholas.
So I wasn't named after him. He's Nicholas Joseph. I have an older brother, Francis, and then they named me Nicholas Michael.
Oh man, that's just
and with Italians, middle names mean a lot. So
yeah,
leave it that way. Yeah.
So so you started your book in part by researching your family and your wife and this, that, and the other, and then stepped up to the plate to do your own. And in the first chapter, you speak. Obviously, it's about your father, and so I have to start by asking, because I did 20 years in the Air Force, and he spent some time in the Army Air Force. Is that correct? So tell me a little bit about your father and
Sure.
and just a little bit about what you say about him and his influence on you and so forth.
Sure. So my dad was, like my father-in-law, was in World War II. My dad was in World War II. They all did that. They all saluted and stepped up. So the Air Force didn't exist, as you know, in World War II. It was called the Army Air Force. So he was in the Army, and he was a mechanic. He was very good with his hands. So they had him fixing planes. They had him fixing whatever they needed to have him fix. So he became a staff sergeant. He was a tough guy, Kevin. I mean, remember, he grew up in a family where his father came over as a shoemaker. My grandfather was a shoemaker. I couldn't find work as a shoemaker, so he got work as a hat maker, because Beacon at that time was very big in all kinds of hats. This whole area is very popular for hats. So my grandfather, I don't think he spoke 6 words of English. He married someone he didn't know when he came here. He fell in love with her, but sadly, she died after the last of 4 brothers was born.
Wow.
So my father it was a tough life. My grandfather actually called home, as I describe in the book, for a mail order bride. Like, hey, call your relatives. Hey, I got 4 boys here. I don't know what I'm doing. My wife just passed away. You gotta send me somebody to help me. And the only grandmother I ever knew, Conchetta, was the woman who then came over, married my grandfather, and then raised the family. So you can imagine it's a hard luck. It's a tough, hard luck story that they're living through, right? 4 boys, just lost their mother. So my father was a tough guy. He was in the middle. He wasn't the oldest. He wasn't the youngest. But he's somewhat like me. I'm in the middle. He kind of figured it out. he figured it out. I mean, he kind of understood. Well, if you do this, you get in trouble that way. If you do this, you get in trouble that way. So he figured it out. Never got out of high school. Quit in the 10th grade. And he was all the things you would think of. He was a fireman. He was a servile labor. I mean, he did all the, and then he goes into the Army, Air Corps, gets straightened out a little bit, to be honest with you.
Yes,
the Army does that. The Army does that to you.
It does. Right?
Gets straightened out, learns that he can do wonderful things with his hands, learns that he can make things, meets my mother. This is, while it's a hard luck time in 43, 44, 45, it's a good time. He's a dancer, she's a dancer. They like to party. You should see them cut a rug. I mean,
can't imagine.
Amazing what dance. So they fall in love. They have my brother, then they have me, then my 2 sisters. So my father comes out of the Army. I'm just born. He comes out of the Army, goes to work for Mattawan State Hospital for the criminally insane, which is a big hospital and penal institution in Beacon, New York. So he uses that toughness that he got in the Army. And then, life starts to begin for him. But the Army shaped him. The Army made him. I mean, I can't begin to tell you, all of the stories he used to tell me about what they did, how they did it. And then some of those stories get reflected in the book in terms of how innovative he became. With nothing, he could create something, or with castaways. He would take people's garbage, he would take people's junk, and he would fix it, and he would turn it into stuff that could be used for us. That we didn't have money, and therefore we were always willing to take things and see if they couldn't be put back together. Italians are never poor as long as they have food on the table. So it doesn't matter how little money you have, as long as you have food. And we always had food because we had gardens, and we were going to survive. And he wanted us to more than survive. He wanted us to thrive. And I almost felt compelled to tell that front end story in the book, because that's not how people knew my father. They didn't know my father the way I knew my father. I knew he's a tough guy. You understand what I'm saying? You're military, your dad was military. He comes out with a hardened view of things, right?
Yes.
And then he goes to work in a penal institution. He's there for 35 years. Gets even harder there. He's a little guy. He's maybe 5'7", 5'8". He doesn't weigh 160 pounds, but he's solid muscle, solid brawn, if you will.
Yeah.
And he's got to be able to defend himself every day. Inside penal institutions, you don't have a gun. All you have is a club. So, I mean, he learned to be tough.
Yeah.
But I saw more than that in him.
Of course.
I saw through a lot of this. I could see underneath it, there was this very smart guy that never really was lit up. He never had the chance to light up. He never had the breaks to I find out by accident, he actually played the violin once. I mean, he never wanted anyone to know he played the violin.
Because as a tough guy, particularly back then, that's just not tough,
Right. No, it's not. And, God only knows, I kept saying this to myself, God only knows what he could have done if he had stayed in high school, if he had gotten a high school degree, because you could see it in his life that there were these flashes, these signs of brilliance and what he could do, how he could do it. There was this inner struggle, which all of us have, over simply having fun. I've got a family. How do I balance that? What do I care about myself? I mean, he came to the conclusion, as did my mother, they cared more about us than they cared about themselves. I mean, that's the ultimate sacrifice that parents make. It's no, it's not about me. It's about my kids. It's about so constantly, you're going to do better. You're going to do better. You're going to do better.
But let me ask you something, Nick, because you brought up a really interesting concept that I just got to thinking about, and I don't know this fully because I grew up in a military environment, traveling around a lot, mostly in the 60s and then the 70s. Mm-hmm. But I still think when you talk about your father and grandfather, that era, and there is a question in here somewhere, but the idea of what you were saying about your grandfather being, was it grandfather, your father that was a shoemaker?
It's my grandfather.
Your grandfather, and talking about how he and even your father had to learn things and had to figure out things. I sense, and I don't want to, I'm not going to go negative on it, but I'm contrasting that with sort of, particularly in this country, but I would even say in this newer era, that part of what we're lacking, I think sometimes young people, is that we have so much, we don't have to figure out a lot. I'm thinking about a guy, I believe, I hate to have it wrong, but this may be in Brazil. I read this a few years ago, a guy that made violins and such from trash. I'm talking about from wood sometimes, but from tin, and would put these things together. And have you read this? And he had a whole concert.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, you see, these are extraordinarily, at least in his case, dealing with very poor people. And it forced the creativity. It forced them to figure out life in a different way.
Right.
I don't know what the question is, but I guess I'm trying to just ask you to compare and contrast what you understand about your father and grandfather versus what's happening now, you
Sure.
know?
So it's a good juxtaposition.
Yeah.
For sure, when you have nothing, anything is everything. And that's kind of the way my father looked at
Anything
life.
is
You know,
everything. Yeah.
I tell a story in there, famous story, which tremendously influenced me, about he gets this old, we don't have a power lawnmower. He owns a house. He was able to buy a house with a big yard, garden. Of course, Italians have to have gardens.
Mm-hmm.
But my brother and I are tasked with keeping it up because he's working 3 jobs.
Mm.
So we're push mower people, right? You know what the old push mowers looked like,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I say, Dad, this is getting way too hard. You're killing us here. Can't we get something a little better than this? Or how do I sharpen the blade? So he comes
But
home
just
with
for everybody to know, even when you say push mower, you're talking about one that turns and cuts the grass
That's
manually,
right.
not
Yeah,
a lawnmower.
No, you are propelling the blade.
That's correct.
You're pushing is propelling the blade. So he comes home with this, what I call a piece of junk. He said, I found this, somebody threw it out. So it's an old power lawnmower. The gas tank is removed from it. The engine's still on the block. So he's looking at it. Of course, he's mechanical. And I'll never forget this. And I say, I got to get this gas tank reattached. How do I do that? So one night at dinner, he takes this, we have this giant salt and pepper shaker. I'm sure you've seen them. They're mammoth. He takes that salt shaker out to the yard, takes a piece of copper tubing, and he wraps the tubing around the salt shaker 3 times. So he builds a coil, and the coil is strong enough to absorb the vibration. And he figures out how many turns he needs in order to cover the distance from where the gas tank is to where the engine is. So the gas tank's up here, the engine's down here. He figures that out, and he self-flanges it, self-threads it. And I'm looking at myself and I'm saying, oh my God. And he actually gets it to work. He actually gets the whole piece of junk to work. But that struck me right then and there, like, hey, that's pretty ingenious. How did he figure that out? I mean, that's an engineer at work.
Engineer at work. Yeah, I was thinking the same
How
thing.
did he? So this kind of motivated me. I don't think that's what made me also tell you there was something locked up inside this guy. I mean, there was more here. There's more here than he wanted you to know.
Yes.
But you're asking the question: have we lost it from there to now? And I say I see a lot of that now in the new generation, Kevin. I see a lot of that intuitiveness in the Gen Ys and the Gen Zs, and I'm absolutely hopeful that it's going to be in the Gen Alphas and Betas. But they're caring more about, well, what are we doing with all this? Why do we need this new thing? Can't we make this old thing work? Can't we make this happen? Or can't we repurpose this? Or can't we recycle this? Or can't we redo something with this? So it's a different kind of caring. Wow. So I'm less concerned that now maybe we may have lost something here. To your point, we may have lost basic knowledge. We may have lost. My father never went to. I mean, he obviously went to the Army Air Force School to learn how to fix motors and mechanical things. I'll never forget. He came home from the Army. He was so proud, Kevin, with his little toolkit. The Army let him keep his Army toolkit.
Love it,
man. He absolutely that thing. I mean, I probably should have buried it with him, but at any rate, I've got it. So it's so. I think it's so enlightening when you step back and you say, different place, different time, but maybe we haven't lost that. Maybe we have lost the intuitiveness. Maybe we have lost the ability to understand the basics. I do worry about that in the education system.
Yeah.
I do worry about, especially in something as high tech as what we're doing right now. I mean, does anybody really know how this works? I mean, who other than me, does anybody really know how this works? So, I mean, that I do worry about, but the passion for the same instinctive intuitiveness, can't we repurpose it? Can't we make it work again? I think that's still there. I think it's showing itself in a different way in the modern generations, Kevin.
You know, I'm so happy you said that, because as you began to mention that, because my daughters are, in that group, 27 and 24. And I thought to myself, you're exactly right. And boy, what a nice little boost that was. That I thought, he's right. That this younger generation is figuring out how to repurpose and all these other sorts of things. Okay, so let me ask you this. Nick, we're going to be dangerous together here, because I can tell we could probably do this for 3 or 4 hours. So
probably right at the rate we're going.
I'm going to push this along here, because I got a lot to ask you about and hear from you. But there was one thing that you said early on, and it said you talked about you with your father porch visits, and it said something to the effect of he would sit there with them and hold court. And then you said, here I knew was where I had the best chance to catch him in the right mood for the conversation I had envisioned. I just got to hear about that, what you're talking about there.
So, it's true. And there's a picture of the porch where it happened in the book.
That, yeah.
You saw that picture. Yeah. So we're Plank Avenue in Beacon, New York, very busy street. Our little house and land. And that's where my father would sit at night. He would cool down, go out there with a beer, sit on the front porch, wave to people. Everybody knew my father. He knew everybody. So it was kind of like, okay, he's in the right frame of mind. I have to start to kind of stand up for myself. That's the night I decided to say to him, look, Dad, why are you doing so much to push me when all of my colleagues, all my friends, all my buds don't seem to, they have tough parents too, but nothing like you. You won't let me do this. You won't let me do this.
Yeah.
You push. I think you read the book, you understand. I had to go to summer school, not because I was failing, because my father wanted me to get ahead. So, I by the time I was in the 10th grade, they had no more math to teach me, at Beacon High School. I'd taken everything, and he said, well, they'll figure something out. They'll come up with another course for you. I'm not worried about that. He didn't know what he was talking about, but he knew intuitively he was right. Right. So I said to him, Dad, why can't you cut me some slack? Why is it nothing I do is ever good enough? It's always got to be better. You always got to push me.
How old were you? How old were you at this point?
So that was the summer between my sophomore and junior year.
That's pretty interesting. I don't know if that many sophomores, would come up and ask their dad that these days. Really, I think there was a little extra something going on in your head in a good way. Well, go ahead.
Well, but also, it's a tough. It's a pretty tough life. My father's he's a hardened guy. You get the picture of him, right?
Sure.
He's a loving guy. He's a caring guy, but he is all about we're getting out of the mess we're in. Follow me. I'm working 3 jobs. You're going to work 3 jobs. You're going to work harder. I'm going to work harder. That's his life. And he's kind of saying to you, you're going to do better. You're going to be better than me. And the only way that's going to happen is if you do more. You can't just be satisfied, and you've got to do things and you got to do them well, because you shouldn't be doing them again. You should do them once and get it done. So it was over and over again, Kevin, the same repeating story. Extracurricular activities, very few. Very, very few. Or if I had them, I would squeeze them in. I couldn't play football. I couldn't play baseball. I couldn't play basketball. It didn't fit. I had a paper route. I delivered 100 papers every day.
Amazing.
Every day.
Wow.
Monday through Saturday. I did it after school, during the week. And then I actually won the Gannett Newsboy Scholarship, which is how I afforded to go to RPI. They couldn't afford to send me to RPI.
Interesting.
But we didn't know that, but we're working this scene, and I've got this paper route. I'm knocking the ball out of the park in high school. I'm working at the gas station across, just down the road on Saturdays. I said, how much more can I do, Dad? You cut me no slack. Why? And I'll never forget, I was either going to get what we call in Italian a pacca la a smack on the backside, or I was going to get something profound from him.
Wow.
And I got the profound. I could tell by the look on his face, much like yours. It was a knowing look, just like yours. It was, hey, son, come on, think about it. If nothing changes, nothing changes. If you don't like what you're getting, why do you keep doing what you're doing, son? Because all you're going to get is what you've been getting. Something has to change. You have to change. That's what I want you to do, is to be different than me. I want you to change. I want you to be different than me. I want you to be like me, but I want you to be different than me. I want it to be better for you. And it starts with you, son, not with me.
Wow.
And
that's just amazing. And of course, when he's talking about change, and I guess I'm inferring what you're saying is he's, he's talking about this continuous growth and change, this this always looking for a new way, always taking yourself to another level, right? That's
exactly it. Yeah, I mean, so he's also, I think he's also, I mean, this is why I felt compelled to do this. I think it's a little deep here. He's self-confessing. It's like, don't be like me.
Don't be like me.
Don't be like me, son.
Yeah.
I am not your role model. You have to be your own role model. You have to be different than me. Don't you understand it? That's why I kept saying to you earlier, there was something locked up inside him that very few of us got to see. And that's why, I mean, when I wrote his epitaph and, my son read it at his funeral, I think lots of people were saying, who's this guy he's talking about? Because I saw him differently than most people saw him. And I think that's the deepness and the richness. There's probably some of that in all of us somewhere, Kevin, in all of our relationships. So with Mike DeMarco, I was very fortunate to be able to tell that tender story, to kind of tell that difference, the way we told it. I have to tell you, I had used that for years at IBM. I mean, I told that story on the porch for 20 years at IBM to motivate everybody, to get everybody doing what they were doing. So it was kind of natural as I left and I'm putting my book together. I mean, that story had to show up.
So, to my audience out there, and they all know this, but what you have just heard is maybe one of those, just like you heard from your father, you are now telling me and the viewers, not just for themselves, but for that, but for parents out there, that I recall a time that in a little different way, because part of what you're also talking about is the vulnerability and the transparency of your dad, which you couldn't say. He wouldn't say those words, become
That's
vulnerable.
right.
But he was sharing a vulnerability by saying, I'm not your role model. And I do recall several years ago, to both of my daughters, maybe even more than one, that, we're a Christian family, but I told them very clearly when they were teenagers, listen, I didn't use these words, but I essentially said, I'm not your role model. I fail awful lot as a Christian, and you got to figure this stuff out for yourself, and I think that's a worthy point to bring up to kids, that listen, I'm your parent. I'm going to guide you. There's certain things I know and that I don't know, but I'm not your role model. You got to get better.
I have to say, Kevin, I think I put this in the acknowledgement in the book, and it might, I've said it a number of times. My parents raised a good son.
Yes, they did.
My wife raised an even better husband. My children raised an even better father. So, your point about who you are, it's not who you are, it's who you're willing to be and who you're willing to become and change to. So it's all part of that change theory, that change story. I give Mike the credit of me being the father that I am to my children, because I was a lot like my father when I first started. It was scary,
sure.
And the minute I reflected on that and started to see that, and that my kids, son and daughter, wonderful, wonderful kids. I mean, way smarter than me. We've kind of unlocked and unleashed the brain power here. They would call me out, and they would, I'd stop short and I say, you're right. I can't do that. I can't be that way. You're absolutely right. So I think if you're willing to admit that
Yeah.
as you go along, Kevin,
Mm.
continue to, I mean, even to this day, I'm still trying to learn. I'm still trying to change. You know, I'm 70, I'll be 77 very shortly. It's like,
You're here.
when do you stop? The answer is you shouldn't. That's what we're here for. That's what life
Yeah.
is all about. I mean, that's
Yeah.
why we're born. I mean, we're born to change,
Yeah. Yes.
Isn't
And
that
I'm
true?
that's 100%, and I mean, you're just really knocking it out of the park with these ideas. And I'm sure, you are incredibly familiar with the concept of Kaizen, of
Yes, of
slow
course.
incremental. I mean, you
Yeah,
know it better than most of us. And if people viewing, watching and listening don't know that term, go out and find it. It's not
right.
complicated.
No,
In its essence, it's not it's just, it's just incremental growth and
right.
change. It's just being that, but that's a mindset, right?
Yes,
That, like you said, that self-awareness for you to say, because maybe the typical father, if they're called out, they're like, hey, wait a minute, I'm your dad. You need to,
right, right.
but no, you reflected on it and said,
Yeah,
you know what? You're
you're right.
right.
You're right.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you to, because I'm, uh, we haven't even got past the introduction, but I do want to ask, briefly, I would be remiss to ask about your mother's contributions to your life, but I do then also want to ask you about your wife's contributions, because similar to you, I've been married 35 years, and she doesn't often know it or think about it. She's been my mentor, and
Yeah,
I wholly embrace it. So tell me a little bit about your mom
yeah,
and how she helped shape you, and your wife's
absolutely.
influence, please.
So my mother, God rest her soul,
Mm.
she was the brains in the family. I mean, while my father was the brawn, she was the brains. My
Okay, I'm not going to
mother,
go that far.
yeah, well, my
Yes, I
mother
will.
grad
Yes, I will.
my mother graduated from high school at
Yeah.
16 in New York
Wow.
City.
Okay. Gotcha.
In New York
Wow.
City, one
Okay.
of the toughest high schools.
Sure.
And when she graduated, girls went to one high school, boys went to another high school. So
Interesting. Yeah.
very, very, my mother came from a very Catholic family, in the Bronx. That's how come they're Yankee fans. So she was brilliant. If there but for the luck of God and for a little bit of money, my mother could have gotten a college degree. I mean, she was that smart.
Yeah.
She was intuitive. She spoke 3 languages.
Oh.
I mean, she was like amazing. She was there for us whenever we had an issue in school, whenever we had a problem. I mean, she would make sure that all of that got done. She's tender, loving, the opposite of my father, who was hardened, and tough. Tough. She was a tough woman. Don't misunderstand
Get
me. I
it.
mean,
Get it.
Italian mothers are
Sure.
very tough mothers.
Yeah,
They're
they scare
loving
me.
mothers. Yeah. So, but I give her credit, and I do give her credit in the book as well. In fact, I'll tell you a little story. I mean, my mom was born in the Bronx, raised in the Bronx. She summered in Beacon. We had with a big Italian family. They all settled in Beacon, New York. So she would come up, and the Hudson River's there. So she'd love Dennings Point. Dennings Point is a famous area right on the Hudson River. It turns out Dennings Point years later is now owned by the Beacon Institute of Rivers and Estuaries. So they protect the fresh water supply of fill in the blank, New York, Hudson. And they're now affiliated with Clarkson University. So when my mom passed, I took the money that she left me, and I gave it to the Beacon Institute of Rivers and Estuaries, Clarkson University. And they're naming the building there after my mother on Dennings Point. So they have a facility that's teaching, back to the point you raised earlier, what are we doing to the environment? How do we renew things? Are we paying attention to the freshwater supply? So I mean, and my mom would love that, because that's kind of who she was. My mom was just like that. She loved Dennings Point. She loved teaching. She loved helping people, caring. My mom worked in a nursing home till she was 92.
Wow.
She died at 98.
Wow.
She worked every day.
Wow.
Constantly giving. My mom pioneered this neighborhood service organization where children had no place to go after school. So they created this neighborhood service organization, mostly children of color. I mean, she nurtured them. She tended to their every need. One small story, and she got an award from the Black organization in Beacon, New York. This young boy kept coming into the neighborhood service organization center. She would say to him, I forget his name. She said, you know, Joe, why is it you always have the same shirt on? And he said, because this is Donofrio. It's the only shirt I have. Mm. She went out and bought him 3 shirts. And she told him, Joe, just take care of them, wash them. Listen to this. Gosh. She gets this award. She gets this award at 92. Joe gives her the award. He's the president of this Black organization. He tells this story as he's giving my mother the service award. I mean, that's who she was.
That's incredible.
That's how smart she was. She spoke French, she spoke Italian, she spoke English. You know, she was just an amazingly brilliant woman.
Yeah.
She is the reason I went to work at IBM.
Yeah.
I mean, my mothers have great influence.
That's right. Yeah.
Mothers have great influence on you, you know, and she was powerfully influential to me. You know, she gave me all the logic, told me why I should do it. You know, yeah, it's your choice, but if I were you, this is what I'd be doing. And of
course, this was when
1964. It started.
That's what I thought. Yeah. So this was before it was really understood where any of that was going.
Totally wide open.
She understood that. Yeah.
She got it. She got it.
Very fascinating. So let me then again maybe just briefly ask you, and I say this in earnest. I mean, in part we're covering your back at the front end of this podcast, but ask you about your wife. But I say this in earnest because I recognize. Well, let me just ask you about the influence that she has on you, continues to have on you, probably.
Look, my wife is my partner. You know, sometimes I don't do as good a job, you know, making her the equal partner. There's some of that in the book. You have to remember we moved a lot for IBM.
Okay.
I mean, IBM used to be I've been moved. You know, that's what IBM stood for.
Is that right?
I was one of those I've been moved people, right?
I'll be darned.
And there's a period of time when we went up and down the East Coast together. I mean, we went to Vermont, then we came back here, then we went down to Virginia, then we came back here, and then we went back up to Vermont. It was like the kids didn't know, what's our phone number? You know, what's our address, Dad? Where do we live? So I know you say
I recognize exactly.
You recognize that, you know, being
people ask you where you're from, and you're like, oh, what does he mean? The last place I lived, or where I'm at now, or what are you asking? You know,
and you know, so you know, she was so good at adapting and changing. She was so happy. She loved being in Vermont. You know, she would have preferred that we stayed in Vermont, never left Vermont.
I imagine.
You know, it's a beautiful place. Our daughter was born there. Our son was raised there. Our son still lives up in Vermont. I mean, so that's how much he loved it. So, you know, every step along the way, she made herself second to me. And I didn't realize that, to be candid with you, until I reflected on it.
Yeah.
Now I'm spending the rest of my life trying to actually make her first, or let her be first and let me lead. I'm still not good at that, to be candid with you, Kevin. I'm continuing to work on it. But, you know, I meant it when I said she raised me into the man that I am. She raised me into the man. She raised me into the husband that I am. She raised me into the man that I am. She gets all the credit. Told you she's a registered nurse. She actually started out as a nurse. She doesn't know anything about building. She doesn't know nothing about building. She has built an incredible set of houses here in Ridgefield. You know, it's just her passion. You know, I told you, she's a liberal arts person. She's a great painter. She doesn't want me to say that. You know, she's great at what she does. You know, she's very much the quintessential complement of me. You know, as much as I'm the technical nerd over here, she's the liberal thinker, award winner. She's gotten so many awards. She focuses on doing good while doing well. She's done an amazing amount of work here in town. We've actually started an animal rescue center named after her for dogs and cats. She won the Brady United Award just this year. She won their local advocate award for doing her work to try to help people understand gun violence and anti-gun violence and to control it.
Yeah.
This is my wife. I'm proud of her. I mean, she should be talking to you, not me. She should be on your podcast, not me.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
And it's late in life, but I have to say to everybody, it's never too late. It's never too late to realize who you are and who your partner is.
Yes, and and it certainly is. Absolutely got me thinking. Again, I've been married 35 years, but I echo a lot of the same sentiments about my wife, and that she has, and I think the beautiful thing about it is that, at least in my case, I don't even know if my wife really understands the impact that she's had on me, because she's so humble about everything. That I love what you said. She does good while doing well, or something like this. That's just beautiful. Okay, so let me keep moving here. We're not even gonna get close to where I want to go with on this interview, because you're just knocking out nuggets one after the other. So you joined IBM in 1964. It sounds like around in that time, and I just want to ask very quickly, because you talked about the IBM System 360, which you go on to say is what we all know now as the mainframe. I don't completely understand what that means, but probably most of my listeners don't. But just kind of briefly talk about your entrance into IBM, and just really about the culture. That's sort of that whole concept of technology that's just really starting to launch, of digital technology.
So, Kevin, back then in 1964, I actually won a co-op assignment. I was at RPI. They had a co-op program. You had to compete for these assignments. There were about 100 of them. There's like 1,000 in the class. I don't know how many competed, but I actually got 2 assignments. IBM wanted me, and American Electric and Power wanted me. So I'm only, remember, you're only your freshman year. So you've done your first semester, your second semester. And the deal is, if you get on this co-op program, you will go to summer school that summer. And then you will go to work that fall. So you'll be out of phase with your colleagues, your cohort. That was the deal. So, I compete, I get it. And I say to my mother, Ma, American Electric and Power, I'm an electrical engineer. I think I got it right in my head. I think that's what matters, Mom. This is the right thing to be. My father's friends influenced me in making that decision. Power, that's how we're going to distribute it all over the place. Power generation is important. I had done a summer job with Central Hudson, which is our electric provider in the Mid-Hudson Valley. I said, so that's one end, and that's bulky stuff. That's big stuff, because you're generating the electricity and then you're distributing it. And at the other end, Ma, is IBM, which is using it, to kind of revolutionize the entire processing industry for data, which is going to explode.
Goodness.
So, Ma, what do you think? She said, it's stupid to even ask me. She said, you're going to work for IBM. She said, you're going to go to work for IBM because you can stay here. You can stay here, save money.
Yeah.
You can stay home, save money. We'll find a way to get you to work, because we only had one car. We'll find a way to get you to work, and then when you go back to RPI, you'll be even better off. So it was hard to argue with her. I said, you're right, Mom. So I had to turn down American Electric Power, went to IBM, never worked anywhere else other than IBM. September 1964, never worked anywhere else for 44 years. System 360 had just been launched, but more importantly, Kevin, everything was changing. Technology in the stuff that we're using now to talk to each other, that was all at its infancy. It was all evolving. Nobody knew what they were doing. The stuff I was learning at RPI was the basic stuff. How do electrons move around? Which is very important, and that's why I said I think more people need to understand that. So RPI is giving me this great base to build on, and here's IBM saying, well, come on over here, Nick. So, they're giving me assignments like I'm one of them. Like, I am only here for 3 months. That's okay, go do this. Maybe I did some of my most brilliant technical work that September. From September to December, I powered out this incredible, thought process about how do you design this and how do you design that. And System 360 is taken off like a rocket. And I'm designing one of the subsystems that go in it.
Unbelievable.
And I'm just a co-op student. How can you trust me? I mean, I wasn't thinking that, but I was like, okay, guys, I'll jump in with you. I'll jump in. I'll swim as fast as you can. I can swim. And then I pass my work off to someone else. So I'm loving it. Go back to RPI, get back into the flow for my next semester, then right back to IBM again. That summer, a bigger job. It's no longer technology. It's like, okay, this is how the system works next. You understand how the system works? We do this, we do that. And then the third assignment's even a bigger job. It's like, hey, Nick, this is how it gets programmed. So, I mean,
wow.
You have to, look, I know you said you're a Christian family. I'm also a Christian. I do believe there's something else guiding us. I don't know what it is, but when you read my book, when you read my book, it's pretty self-evident that I'm either a lucky guy that all the moons lined up and that the circumstances all work for me, or there is something going on that says, you parlay this goes first, that goes second, this goes third, and it all seems to work for me. And I don't know why that happens, Kevin. But the book kind of touches that, and it makes you scratch your head and say, how did that all work for this guy?
Yes, that's an interesting point you're bringing up. I recall a couple years ago or something, I was listening to a physicist talk, and I can't express it the way that he did, but he said, listen, he said, here's how perfectly tuned the universe is. He said, if you were to be able to shoot an arrow through the universe, it could go, he talked about something about this concept that, it could shoot through, trillions of light years and land right on point there. And I think the point he was trying to say is that all of these things follow a perfect order. And partly when I hear what you're saying, you may not recognize it's God. There's all sorts of different ways of thinking about that, but you're following the perfect order. Even like for instance, your intuition, your mother's intuition.
Yes,
you're just following the things. I mean, this is just my perspective on that sort of thing. Let me ask you this, Nick. So, if you're with a technology this deep into it that you were, all the way from an intern, if you will, to executive vice president level, you learn these things over 44 years, and you see it unfolding. So it's kind of like watching your kids grow up. You don't really, versus maybe a cousin that you see once a year, they show up, you go, wow, you're so big. But so I want to ask you this question though, was there anything in that 44 years, maybe just one thing that just blew your mind with respect to technology? You went, whoa, this is crazy where this is going.
I think they're related to your point. So I like your thinking there, by the way. There's a natural order of things, and I fortunately have seen it work out for me, right? And the book does suggest that there's some of that going on. But two things happened in my life that I'll put together for you. So I go back to Burlington. I'm there for almost 10 years. And then I'm asked to go back. It's actually Essex Junction, Vermont, but we call it Burlington. So I go back there, and now I'm responsible to develop technology. And I'm expected to develop this new technology that we don't have, that we've got to get to, because it's really the technology that switches. So it's all silicon based. It happens to be CMOS, which is what most stuff is made of now, but it didn't quite exist then, right? So I'm asked to develop that for IBM. I'm asked to bring it into, and I do. We struggle. I bring it into the company. We bring it into Burlington. We qualify it. And then I'm asked to leave again. So I leave. That same technology comes back to me when I'm sent to Austin, Texas, to work on what's called a mid-range system for IBM that they're struggling getting out. We call that the P series now, P series server. We successfully get it out. What we're using that technology to get it out. That technology is our savior. That technology, and we kind of clear the table. I mean, we're knocking everybody out. We're competing with DEC, we're competing with Sun, we're competing with.
Yeah, I mean, IBM was
we're
the gold
knocking,
standard.
We're knocking them all over. We're knocking them all over the place. Then I go to Poughkeepsie, to the mainframe to kind of bring full circle back to your point. And I'm saying to myself, we've got the wrong technology here. We're doing the wrong thing. This thing is in dire straits. So I just started this new business in Texas, that's doing well. And we got this business at Poughkeepsie, which is the foundation of IBM. It's in trouble. We got to change everything, is what I concluded. We got to change it to what? I think we got to change it to that same technology that I brought into IBM in Vermont. How crazy is that? I mean, I brought it in up there, went to Texas, benefited from it. And I said, look, I'm telling you right now, this is the technology that we need. This is the one that's going to save us. It gives us a better cost base. It allows us to be much more competitive. We have to change the system itself and the software, the way we're doing it, but we control that, so we can do it. So we can preserve our assets. We can preserve the client's assets. Everybody in IBM, like, what? What are you talking about? We have to do this? And I said, it's either that or we're done.
But this is the scientific mind right here, not just engineering, but the scientific mind that they talk about this notion that, you don't want all the scientists to start peering at the same thing and just start going down there blind, not even blindly. You need people like you that say, no, we got to change this.
Yeah.
Right.
And I have to tell you, I agree with that. And I have to tell you, the people in Poughkeepsie, because that's where this all happened, it was Poughkeepsie, New York, very close to where I was born and raised, by the way. So there is a full circle closure here, right on the Hudson River. They understood it. And I say this over and over again in the book, Kevin, when you're looking for the answer, I mean, as much as you want to look up and pray, look down, because it's the people in the organization, the people who are on the ground, they actually know the answer. They actually know how to go. Nobody's asking them. They're just not engaged.
Yeah. This is fascinating. This is so fascinating what you're talking about there, because you did talk about the idea of asking your clients. I remember a mentor of mine, Marshall Goldsmith. I remember when I first saw him at National Speaker Association convention, and he came out. I didn't know who he was at the time, but he came out and he just, unlike most of us sitting in the audience that had suits and ties on, and we were these speakers and consultants and coaches and all these kinds of things, he came out in, like a polo shirt and khaki, I think probably even tennis shoes, and he was already then, I think, probably in his 70s at that point. But anyways, so, he said, hey, I want to ask you a question. How do you know how to be a better leader? And of course, all the speakers and consultants throwing out these fancy, answers and, these complicated, all these, and he was like, okay, okay. And there was 1,500 people nodding. Yeah. Okay. No, that's good. That's good. He said, but that's not really where I'm going with this. He said, if you want to know how to be a great leader, he said, go ask your employees. I almost fell out of my chair. He says, he said, you go ask them, what can I do to be a better leader for you? Right. He said, they'll tell you. And by the way, Nick, I've told the story before. Maybe people who listen, if is there anybody ready to listen to my podcast, they've heard me say, I came home and asked my daughter, my youngest daughter, came in my office, and I said, Alexandra, I have a question for you. She goes, okay. And she was only like 11, maybe at the time. I said, I want to know how I can be a better dad for you. And I should have known better to ask, because she told it to me straight. She said, let me think about this, Dad, and she goes, I got one for you. She said, how about when I come home, and because I work out of a home office, and I come into your office to say hi, how about if you don't do this? And I'm going to mimic my computer. She goes, how about you don't do this? Oh, hi, Alexandra. Yeah. Oh, oh, you had, okay, good day. Okay. I said to myself, oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
And you know what she was saying? Be present,
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, mind blowing what you're saying here.
I think that's a perfect example. There is a spot in the book, a pivot point for me as a leader, when I have to give up being the engineer and start to be the leader of technology. That started in Vermont. IBM used to do this all the time with their opinion surveys, Kevin. These opinion surveys were powerful. They were the employees speaking up,
Speaking up.
saying, this is what you're doing right. This is what I flunked my first opinion survey. I flunked it big time. I was on the brink of actually being removed from management. I was so bad because I was not listening to the people. I was telling them. I was just telling them. I wasn't communicating with them. I mean, speaking is one thing, listening is another. You have to learn that. And that's where I came up with this idea. My job now is to be your enabler. From now on, you have to tell me what you're doing, tell me what you need, tell me when you're going to get it done. And I have to ask you, what more do you need in order to get it done? I never left. After that incredible baptism of fire, I never left an IBM meeting without saying to all of you, now tell me what else you need to get the job done, because I'm going to expect you to get it done. So it's not me empowering you. I have to enable you. Enablement is a much more powerful thought. I'm committed to you. I am going to be responsible to get you the resources you need, and you're going to be responsible to give me the results that I need. Is that the deal? If that's the deal, we're done. I learned that very early. So if you're going to be bad, Kevin, if you're going to be bad early in your career.
Be bad early. Well, and learn from, and I think you say this, so we're talking about feedback and learn from all of these sorts of things, just as you expressed from, being a dad and a husband and all these other things that you recognize things and then you change, you at least you attempt to change. It's fascinating what you're saying, because my work is not a podcast. My work, I'm a soft skills and leadership coach. This is what I do more in my world. And all of what you're saying just resonates so deeply with me, including enabling employees or whatever by, and I think in part is what you're saying, a leader removes the obstacles, right? That's part of what you do, is get the obstacles out of their way so that they can, as you're saying, be more enabled or empowered to move on what they're doing. You see, that's fascinating what you're saying. I don't have a ton of time here. Gosh, we're going to have to do a part 2. I'm just saying, we just scratching the fringes here, but listen, you've dropped so many nuggets on my audience and me. It's really incredible. And I'm not surprised though. But there's a couple of things I was just paying attention to in your book and some of these other things. But you talk about the themes that have guided you in your work, both inside and outside of IBM. And so I want to just kind of pose these very quickly and maybe just kind of get maybe almost a lightning round here in about these things. And so you say, for one, you say, understand and appreciate where you stand on the issue of change, which is fascinating.
So do you embrace it? Do you avoid it? Do you in any way, shape, or manner have a perspective on it? I think you have to think about that, Kevin, regularly. Because there are people who simply want to avoid change. They want to deny it. And then there are people more like me who want to embrace it and lead it. I think you need to understand that, because as we all know, whether you like it or not, everything is changing every day. And you can't just freeze it. You can't just leave it the way it is. It won't stay that. That's not the way nature works. That's not the way we've evolved, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But so fascinating about what you're saying, to think about that question, what you do with it or where you stand with it, because there are awful others on the other end of the spectrum, perhaps, who are too quick to change, you see? So there's those who don't want to change. And then there's others. There's a balance to be struck, isn't there? So you say, Billy, we've kind of talked about this a little bit, but you also say what you've learned is be willing to ask for help.
Well, that's back to the original problem I had in Vermont. I went into that employee feedback meeting expecting to lose my job. So I just simply said to them, hey, I've let you all down. It's obvious. You don't have to say a word. I don't expect any of you to say anything to me. I am a total jerk. I get it. I apologize. With your permission, if IBM allows me, I'd like to continue as your manager. Can you help me?
Wow, that's striking.
Can you help me? I mean, and these were my friends. In the old days, Kevin, we were buds. I mean, I moved them all from the Mid-Hudson Valley up the Essex Junction, Vermont. I mean, the mission moved. I was the mover. I was their manager.
Mm.
They just weren't willing, because we were friends, to tell me what a jerk I was,
I see.
other
I
than
see.
through this mechanism.
You
And
know, wow, that's powerful. You know,
powerful.
when we talk about 360 feedback type things, and I encourage leaders or just professionals to go out and
Yeah.
get feedback, you know, I say you can't just ask, hey, you know, how am I doing as a leader? I think you have to ask one more question or make one more statement, something to the effect of, and I'm really serious about that. I really want to know. There will
Yeah.
be no retribution or
Right.
repercussions. I mean, I really want to learn and grow. Please tell me the hard stuff. You
Yep.
see, you've got
So
to get to that point, don't you?
you do. And you asked about my mother earlier on.
Hmm.
That was my mother.
Is that right? She
What
tell you
was
the hard.
coming out, what was coming out in that meeting
I see.
was my mother's guidance.
Beautiful.
It was, I'm going to change. Maybe it was part of my father. I'm willing to change, but it was my mother saying, I need your permission now to continue. I need your help to continue. I can't do this by myself. So do you want me to remain your manager? I mean, I did all their jobs, Kevin, was the problem. I mean, I was that smart. I mean, we were making the very first chips for IBM. These are the very first
Goodness.
semiconductor chips we were making. I knew everything. The problem is it was moving fast, and I
Yeah.
really didn't know everything. I didn't know the problems they were having. I didn't know how difficult their jobs were. And I was too busy telling them what they should have done, as
Wow.
opposed to enabling them to do what they thought was right.
Wow. Man, that's just so doggone powerful. So you're probably familiar with Simon Sinek, and he talked in even, I think it was, might have been his first book, about the power of why and understanding the why. And you say, though, fully understand what you are doing and why you are doing it. What do you mean by that?
So too often, Kevin, we are results driven, and that's all we care about is the what.
Mhm.
And every time you only focus on the what, the why will get you. You see it all the time. You see it in life. You see it in corporations. All I want are more sales. Well, if I give you more sales, who's going to ask the question, how did you get those sales? Why did you get those sales? Why did nobody else get those sales? And then you end up in a mess like Wells Fargo. Like, oh, that's how you got those sales? Really? So, and I'm an active board member in many different companies. So I don't just want the results. I want to know why you got those results and how you got those results,
Wow.
not just what you got. If
Yes.
all you focus on are the results, then the consequences for you are likely to be dire at some point in time. And we saw this with Boeing. We've seen this with WorldCom. I mean, the list goes on, right? We've seen this with Dieselgate in Europe, with Volkswagen. If all you focus on is the what, then all you're going to get is the what, and you're going to get the consequences of the what as well. So why matters. Why and how matter.
I mean, we've all heard that a million times, but to hear you iterate it from your standpoint is really quite powerful, even down to, you know, why am I living? What is my, this is a what question, but it's also a wow. What is my purpose? Why am I doing this? Why am I leading this group? Why am I part of this company? I mean, all of that whole why thing just gets down to the heart of it, doesn't it? You really start to understand purpose when you talk about, man, that's fantastic. Okay, so I'm going to talk about, I'm going to ask you a few things that I found maybe from either your literature or from another interview that I just think they're fascinating questions. This sort of lightning round thing that you've obviously traveled not only around the United States, but as a global leader, you probably traveled the world. What's your favorite place? I mean, yeah.
So interesting you say I've traveled. I probably have over 10 million frequent flyer miles. So does that help you understand how I felt? Yes, jump change. Yeah. So, I think they're all unique. I loved Vietnam. I loved going to Vietnam. I went to Hanoi. Uh, I learned so many lessons. I know your dad was in the Vietnam War.
Hmm.
I learned so many lessons there. You have to. I talked to their leaders. I talked to several of their military leaders who,
Interesting.
I mean, they were so thoughtful and really not. They weren't upset with me. I mean, I was there to help them. We were there to grow our business. From an
Sure.
IBM perspective, we had built a couple of centers there. And I'll never forget the president, says to me, look, Mr. Donofrio, I need your help. I need your help because my people work so incredibly hard. The
Mm.
problem is the only jobs we get are the jobs that no one else wants.
Wow.
I need you to help me get the jobs that everybody else wants.
Wow.
I need you to help. I mean, very thoughtful, very powerful. And of
Yeah.
course, I didn't go to Vietnam, but I'm a Vietnam era person. To be honest with you, I lived through that. So it was very emotional,
Yeah, I
just to
can
be
imagine.
candid with you. Very
Yeah.
emotional for me in many ways. You could see how resourceful they were,
Yeah.
Kevin. You could see how smart they were, and their passion. So, and by the way, their culture is amazing. It's a blend of French
I
and
have a friend who lives in Vietnam now,
Asian.
and yeah, he
Yeah,
talks very, very fondly of the people and
yeah,
the culture and so forth. Yeah.
yeah. Very, very, and their food was incredible. So that left a very big, lasting impression on me.
Mm.
And then I think the other place that left a, by the way, Vietnam, I remember going through this with them. We were at a dinner and they said to me, Mr. D'Onofrio, who do you think is going to win the global race for
Sure.
economic dominance? This was quite a while ago. Do you think it's going to be China or do you think it's going to be India? That was their
Oh,
question at dinner.
wow.
And I said to them, well, my logic is it's probably going to be India. And the reason it's going to be India is because I actually believe that free will triumphs and wins
Here,
in the
here.
end.
Yeah, agree.
And I have to tell you,
No
to a
question.
person, the leaders who were at that dinner all said the same thing. They all
Fascinating.
said exactly the same thing.
Fascinating.
It is.
I get it
It was.
though.
Yeah, very,
Yeah.
very fascinating. And that leads me to the next place, which, I mean, I love Johannesburg. I love Japan. I love China. I love Europe. I'd have to say it's India. It is India. It's Bangalore.
Mm.
The previous president of India, Abdul Kalam,
Mm.
was a dear friend of mine.
Very nice.
We went back. IBM went back into India many
Yeah.
years ago. Remember, they nationalized our assets, took them away from us. When they had more of a socialistic government. So we had to be careful about going back in again.
Mm.
So I was one of the first IBM executives to go back to India to literally have all these conversations with the government to begin again. And they have a different system there. So the president is not the president of the government. It's the prime minister who leads the government.
Yes.
The president is more of the ombuds person. The
Yeah.
president listens to the people
Within
in
the country itself.
right,
Yes.
and the Congress. So I mean, the Congress lines up in front of the president's door to complain.
Just,
They're not listening to this.
yeah.
But Abdul Kalam, what a very spiritual man, monastic, very smart, very brilliant, very much about a perfect dichotomy to study. He is the man who actually gave India the intercontinental ballistic missile. So
Oh my goodness.
he was a physicist. He actually developed that weapon for them.
Wow.
And at the same time,
Wow.
he becomes this monastic, totally peace-loving, totally education-bound, totally my people, my people, my people. Just an amazing contrast.
Love that.
Of sides. So I have to pay homage to him every chance I get. He passed away a few years ago, but we did some amazing things together. He and I in India studying,
That's incredible.
helping.
That's incredible. And
moving
certainly the Indian
forward.
people, as many other cultures, have contributed a lot to this country. So
Absolutely.
speaking of high-end people, and I just have a couple more questions here for you. I
Yep.
understand that you had some sort of a relationship with Steve Jobs.
I did indeed.
Tell me just a little
So
bit about that.
sure. So Steve and I were thrown together, to be candid with you. That's how we had our relationship. This is IBM before I went to Austin to fix the RS-6000. They were struggling with that system. And John Akers was looking for ways to try to help that organization, get that product out faster. So through Watson, the Watsons, who knew Jobs went to see the Watsons to learn from Mr. Watson. He gets introduced to John Akers. So John Akers says on his own, he didn't consult with me, we're going to buy the front end. We're going to buy the front end of Steve's work. He was at Next at the time. He had left Apple. He was at Next. There was a new interface there called Next Step. And it's a Unix thing. That's what I was building, as a Unix system. So made sense. So I get to execute that contract. I go to Austin. I'm handed this problem, and I'm handed Steve Jobs. And Nick, figure out what to do with him.
Which I understand it was not that easy to know what to do with him.
Yeah. So Nick, we're going to give him a lot of money. We agreed to pay him this much money, but you have to figure out when to pay him, and you have to figure out how to pay him, and what we're going to get for what we're buying.
Yeah.
That's how Steve and I got thrown together.
Very interesting.
So we worked together very thoughtfully. Honestly, my relationship with Steve was so different than what you read about. It was
right. That's interesting. Yeah.
An entirely different side of Steve. Thoughtful, understanding, very knowledgeable. I like to say this, in conversation, I'd lower my voice. He'd lower his voice even lower. By the time we were done, we were whispering to each other, instead of yelling at each other. We're like,
fascinating.
Okay, Steve, really?
Yeah.
I don't think that works, Steve.
Yeah.
And then we got through that. We successfully launched the RS-6000 and AIX, and Steve kept reaching back at me. He goes back to Apple. Nick, can I stay close to you? Can I help? Yes. Oh, and this is a very sad story. And my wife keeps saying to me, maybe you did the wrong thing. So my wife gets very ill. She has to have major surgery. So she has just had her surgery. I'm in the hospital room with her. Steve calls me on my cell, and he asks me to come. He's going back to Apple. Come work with me, Nick. Come run a piece of Apple with me. I said, Steve, I'd love to do it, but I can't. My wife literally is laying here. She just came out of the operating room. I can't leave her, Steve. I can't leave her. She's going to need time to recover. So this is not meant in any way, shape, or manner. I made that choice. I'm not blaming my wife for this. I'm not blaming anything. Yeah. And I'm very happy with my choice.
Yeah.
He understood. He didn't like it.
Of course.
He understood. We remained friends. We did things together. We helped him with Power PC. We helped him do a lot of wonderful things. I remained his friend until the end.
Wow.
He called me when I left IBM. He'd call me always at night, 11 o'clock at night. My wife would pick up the phone and say, "It's Steve." He forgets what time it is. He's in a different time.
He's in California.
Zone. Yeah, he's in California. And I was very saddened by the loss of Steve.
Yeah, I've certainly, like many people, have read a lot of things about him, different things, but I certainly have a healthy respect for. I mean, that even just goes without saying, his vision and all these other sorts of things. So let me just ask you one more question here, Nick, and that is that because I'm going to have to wrap it up here, but where can people find your book, or learn more about you? I mean, I just, you're I think you're just an incredible person. I don't know if you're doing any more writing, whether it's blogging or anything. You certainly should be. But that said, where can people find your book, or just be in contact if they'd like to, or whatever?
Sure. So, Kevin, the website for the book is all together, nickdonofriobook.com
Okay.
/. www.nickdonofriobook. It'll tell you how to get the book. One of the things I would say to people, and it also tries to list other resources on the website. But Kevin, I'm not in this for the money.
I imagine not.
You understood in the beginning. Yep. I'm in it to self-document.
Yep.
So,
yep.
And these podcasts I'm doing because I hope they help other people become enlightened to do the same thing. There's a way, if you wanted a personalized copy of the book, there's a recommendation on the website. It says, order this way, tell them you want it personalized. And I go to the little bookshop here in Ridgefield, which is where you'll order it.
Yeah.
And twice a week, if there's enough, I'll personalize books and they'll send them out. You want to know more about me? I'm all over the web, Kevin.
Yes, you are.
I'm an open book. No pun intended.
Yes, you are.
I am an open book, Kevin.
Well, listen, I sit here and think I have a very dear friend of mine. I'm gonna do a quick shout out, Doug Allen. He's one of he's actually a radio engineer right now, but he is deep into the digital world and computer world, and he's one of my favorite people. He usually, when he and I talk, though, I just have to pacify him like I'm listening, because I don't understand half of what he's saying. But he's an incredible technologist, and I'm going to reach out to you and maybe get a personalized book for him, because he would absolutely love to, just all of the things that you're talking about. I'd be really afraid for you and him to have a conversation.
I love it.
Get very geeky. But listen, sir, thank you so incredibly much for spending this time. I do recommend your book highly, because it does talk about, for leaders, just for understanding a little bit more about the trajectory of technology, but then also really it's the personal lessons that you provide, that just enormous mentoring that this can be for all of us, young, more seasoned, if I can say, people, whatever the case might be. So, but listen, thank you. It's an incredible interview, conversation really, and I appreciate you so very much.
I enjoyed being with you. Honestly, you're a good person, Kevin. You did a great job. Hopefully what I said means something to someone and does some good. That's
no
all
question
in
my mind. I'd love to be able to stay in touch with you. So,
please do.
I'm going to try to, and God bless you and your family. And just, listen, you come from some really great genes. So, there's
could be around for a while.
You're going to be around for a while. So
maybe there's another book in here.
That'd be terrific.
Don't forget, if nothing changes, nothing changes.
Nothing changes. Yes.